Hi everyone, this is Jiggie, a portrait and wedding photographer from the Philippines, and welcome to the channel. So in this video, let's talk about 5 possible reasons that hinders your growth as a photographer. I am actually putting the disclaimer there that these are just possible reasons. There are much more, or it might not be applicable to you, but of course, I'm just going to share these things that I've learned throughout the years that practically hindered my growth too as a photographer. But before anything else, if you guys haven't subscribed to the channel, and would want to learn more about off-camera flash photography or maybe just photography in general, then this channel is for you. So you might want to consider subscribing, and while you're at it, click that notification bell so that you get notified every time I upload a new video. And if you want to see more of my images, you could always find me on Instagram. It's at Jiggie Alejandrino. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the first possible reason that hinders your growth as a photographer. Number 1 is that you might be getting too creative. There are some standards in which you'd want to have that creative shot, but there's nothing wrong about a classic photograph. And sometimes sometimes some photographers tend to go on the more creative side all the time without even mastering the classic photograph, the classic boring photograph. But again, it is classic for a reason because it will stand the test of time. So for me personally, I would really want to see an individual focus on just those classic portraits first, those things that we know work, and then afterwards go into the creative aspect. The problem is there's some photographers that tend to jump to the creative more than mastering first the classic images. So when I'm saying that sometimes I see this in a lot of photographers that actually shoot with me, the problem is they tend to look for so many different angles that because of those angles, it just ruins the image, or you lose focus on what you're supposed to be doing. Let's say, for example, you're shooting a bride portrait or a groom portrait. And because of the notion of leading lines, you want this line to lead towards that particular subject, you tend to focus more on the leading lines rather than the subject itself. For me, if you guys want to, especially if you're just starting out in photography, learn from the masters. Look at how Rembrandt does his images, or even just Da Vinci, the way they paint their portraits. It's just fantastic. It's classic, very simple lighting, and for me, that is a good baseline before you get too creative. All right? So with that, actually, by being too creative or looking at the old masters, the next problem would be you tend to replicate instead of emulating. When you see something beautiful, it's really not bad to use it as a basis for your own personal work. But that's the key there, your own personal work. So you see what they did there, which you like. But the most important thing is you take that and you put your own personal style in it. The reason why I would adamantly suggest that or advise that is that your growth as a photographer is also dependent on your growth as an individual. So if you keep replicating images, then you will never really grow as a photographer as compared to just emulating and putting your own style to it. So when you grow as a person, you also grow as a photographer, and even your images would actually mature on how you mature as a person. So it just goes side by side. Okay? Then afterwards is that another reason that could possibly hinder your growth is that you may have the mentality of being too proud of your images that you've already created, that you tend to come up with so many excuses. When, let's say, for example, I've never been one to really take everyone's suggestions as gold, but rather I take it with a grain of salt. However, if you can't even take it with a grain of salt, you give so many excuses. Like, for example, when I would be trying to teach an assistant photographer, and I say, how come you did this and not this one? They would always give an excuse that say, the light wasn't that great, or the location wasn't that great. When in reality, all you have to do is tell them that if the light isn't that great, then create your own light. If the location isn't that great, then shoot tight, remove the location. Even I've said this in numerous videos also. The worst excuse would be they would say, I can't get a good portrait because the subject wasn't photogenic. When I would always tell them, you know what, there's no such thing as an ugly model, just really a bad photographer. But it also has to it also boils down to a lot of pride in the images that you're taking, that you tend to fall in love with your images, that you say, oh, it's already beautiful, and if somebody else tells you that it's not, or if somebody tries to give you some creative criticism, you always have excuses on why you weren't able to do that, or you won't even listen to them. Again, take everything with a grain of salt, but with an open mind. You're never going to be the best photographer out there, because even the best photographers out there will not even tell you that they are the best. They always want to learn. Now, in line with what I just discussed about taking constructive criticism with a grain of salt, you also must make sure that you don't fall into the social media trap, because that one will definitely hinder your growth as a photographer. What do I mean by that? We do not shoot for other people, rather we shoot for ourselves. We don't shoot for likes for social media, we shoot because we love photography. And the moment that we know that we love photography, then the images will become better. Because if you're shooting for someone else, you have to remember you're never gonna please anyone, or you're never gonna please everyone. And the problem by not pleasing everyone is that you would take it again on yourself. It may affect your confidence, that you may think that you're a bad photographer because no one's liking your photographs. It's not that. You shoot for yourself, but you should also be your own harshest critic. Meaning, if you're shooting something and you want to become better, then you learn how to become better. But do not shoot for somebody else. Do not fall into that trap of shooting for likes. And last but not the least, the most important, there is no such thing as a shortcut to learning. Now, I do hold a lot of one-on-one online workshops, and one thing that I've noticed with a lot of the participants is that they always want to go from step 1 to step 4 immediately. That they tend to lose track of step 1, 2, 3, 4. It's always going to be a question, how did you shoot that? It's about the technical side of thinking that they could copy it immediately, but then it goes back again, never replicate and just emulate. But it is about understanding the process and not just repeating the process. Like if you ask me how I shot that particular images, I can give you all the settings, but you'll never be able to get into my head if you think that all you need to do is just follow step A, step B, step C, step D. When you should really look deeper into what photography really is, or what I am trying to do. So that is what I mean about not taking that shortcut to learning. Always take a step back, figure it out. The long process will help you more in the future, which will make it easier because you learned every single basic thing and you understood. So whatever mistakes that you have in the future, you could easily correct them because you understand the principles behind that. Okay, so again, to recap, the first is again, being too creative for your own good. Number 2 is replicating, not emulating. Number 3 is always making excuses, being too proud of the images that you create. Number 4 is that do not fall into that social media trap. And number 5, there is no such thing as a shortcut to learning. So these are 5 possible things that I feel might be hindering your growth as a photographer. Of course, there are going to be so many other reasons there, but again, these are just possibilities. So it's really up to you as an individual to take these things that I'm saying with a grain of salt. And if it does help you, do like this video and subscribe to the channel. And while you're at it, click that notification bell so that you get notified every time I upload a new video. Now, again, if you want to see more of my images, you can always find me on Instagram. It's at Jiggie Alejandrino. Okay, till the next video.